Hi there, hope you're doing great. My name is Ben Mongoza, and I introduce you to the very first episode of Learning the Law with Mwata. And in today's very first episode, I'm going to be walking you through the introduction to criminal law. And in this introduction to criminal law, we're going to look and understand at the things that form criminal law. What is the definition of criminal law and how you establish criminal liability? Those are the things that we're going to look at. Criminal law is also referred to as penal law. The word penal is derived from the word penalty. Thus, criminal law is the law that applies in the prosecution for an act known as a crime. When a person conducts themselves in a manner that is referred to as a crime, then that person is going to be prosecuted using criminal law. Now, in order for you to prosecute someone using criminal law, or in order for you to use criminal law in prosecuting an individual or a group of persons, you must establish the criminal liability of these people. Now, what really is criminal liability and what is it all about, and how do you establish the same criminal liability? That is what criminal liability has been defined as the process or the mechanism of holding an individual responsible for their criminal conduct, or rather for their criminal act. So criminal liability is simply a process or a mechanism where a person is made to face the consequences of their criminal conduct or of their criminal act. That is basically what criminal liability is. And this is how one can establish criminal liability. The following principles must be present at all times in establishing that an individual was in fact criminally liable for an act that they are deemed to have committed. Criminal liability rests on 7 core principles. There are 7 fundamental principles that govern the establishment of criminal liability. The first principle is the principle of legality. So this principle of legality simply highlights that there is absolutely no crime where there is no law governing a particular act or conduct. This is regulated or further highlighted by the Latin maxim which says nullam crimen sine lege. Nullam crimen sine lege. This simply translates to say where there is no law, there is no crime. So in order for you to establish criminal liability, first and foremost, you must find the law that prohibits a certain conduct. Take for instance, if there is a law that says no one should dance in public, and then a person is seen dancing in public, that person will be deemed to have broken the principle of legality, because the law clearly states that you cannot be seen dancing in public, and this person is dancing in public. Okay, now in an event where there is absolutely no law that states that a person cannot be seen dancing in public, and this person goes out dancing in public, there is absolutely no crime, as in the maxim nullam crimen sine lege. You cannot be prosecuted for something that is not statutory or legally prohibited. In order for you to be criminally liable, first of all, you must go against the principle of legality. The second principle in establishing criminal liability is the principle of actus reus. Now remember, we said the first principle is the principle of legality. to mean there must be a law prohibiting a certain conduct. The second principle is the principle of actus reus, translating as the physical conduct. Okay, so this principle simply stipulates that a person should conduct themselves in the manner strictly prohibited by the law. The physical conduct of a person going against the principle of legality, that is what amounts to actus reus. The law clearly states that you cannot be seen dancing in public, our example, and then you go ahead and dance in public. So the act of you dancing in public is the actus reus because you are physically doing it, your physical conduct going against the principle of legality. That is what the principle of actus reus entails. In order for you to establish criminal liability, you must first of all establish that the law clearly prohibited the conduct and that a person outrightly conducted themselves in a manner that is prohibited by law. That is what actus reus translates to, or that is what actus reus means. Next principle of actus reus in establishing criminal liability is the principle of causation and harm. This principle requires that the accused person's conduct should be the actual cause of harm to a person's life, a person's person, or a person's property. If the conduct of the accused is not the direct cause of harm or injury to the person, then you cannot hold the accused person criminally liable. This is enshrined in the Latin maxim, which is known as novus actus intervenienis. This maxim translates to say there must be no intervening act in the chain of causation. When an intervening act is seen or is introduced in the chain of causation, then criminal liability is significantly reduced on the side of the accused. In establishing criminal liability is the principle of mens reas. So mens rea is simply a blameworthy state of mind. So in order for you to establish criminal liability, it must be a fundamental requirement that the accused person, the person named to have committed the crime, possessed the necessary ill intent to commit that crime. The person must have intention, actual intention to commit the crime. If there's no actual intention, then you cannot say there was criminal liability. The person must intend from the onset to commit the crime. Failure to do so, criminal liability becomes a very, very difficult thing to prove. And this then brings us to the important principle in establishing criminal liability. Is the principle of concurrence, or rather coincidence, of actus reus and mens rea. This principle is enshrined deeply in the case of Fagan versus MPC, where it was elucidated that in order for criminal liability to be established, both actus reus and mens reus must be present at the same time. This is to mean that you must conduct yourself in a blameworthy manner with the required blameworthy state of mind in order for criminal liability to be established. In the case of Fagan versus MPC, a police officer pulled over this man who was driving, and as this man went to park on the side, he parked on the police officer's foot. When he parked on the police officer's foot, that was actus reus. He did not know, he did not possess the necessary mindset to commit that crime of assault, criminal assault. But later on, The police officer made it known to him that he was parking on his foot, and he willfully refused to move his car. That culminated into mens rea, because he now had full knowledge of what he was doing and that he was causing harm and injury to the police officer on whose foot he was parking, thus rendering him criminally liable for the offense or for the crime that he did at that particular time. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the very vital things that you must first of all look for before you can deem someone as being criminally liable. If all these are present, then a person is deemed to be criminally liable of committing an offense or a crime. If these elements are absent, then you cannot hold someone criminally liable of a crime or an offense.